Thank you very much. I am absolutely thrilled to be here today with you. I have had the very good fortune to have attended a couple of NACCW conferences in South Africa, the first one in Cape Town and the last one in Durban. I will be back when COVID permits travel again and large gatherings. But for now, I'm delighted to be here with you virtually. I'm going to just share my screen before I go on. I thought when I was talking to Merle and Zenny a couple of weeks ago about the conference, they mentioned that I was the first national keynote speaker, and that's really quite an honor. And I thought it would be worth noting the very significant role that females have played in the child and youth care field at the practitioner level, supervisor level, in other leadership roles as educators. Women have really dominated the field since its inception. That has been noteworthy. And often that great personal sacrifice in order to support young people, families, and communities. I'm not going to spend all of my time talking about COVID, but given that it has dominated our lives for the last 18 months or so, I thought it would be worth mentioning it briefly just to put in context some of the other things that I'll be talking about. I attended a couple of weeks ago the conference of the Global Social Service Workforce Alliance. And during that conference, it was highlighted the challenges and opportunities that have been presented to the workforce during COVID, and also the really essential role that the social service workforce has played during the pandemic. And that workforce includes, obviously, child and youth care workers, but also our colleagues in other disciplines such as social work, social pedagogy, community workers, and some of the challenges that have been faced, particularly in South Africa, but globally as well, have included increased economic instability, poverty, hunger, school closures, which have been problematic for many reasons, but certainly as it relates to the hunger issue for children that were being fed in school, an increase in gender-based violence as families deal with the stresses brought on by the pandemic, in addition to the other daily stresses they may already have been facing, lockdowns, and often occurring in the context of increased political instability. That's a lot. And that's a lot of things that child and youth care workers have had to deal with in carrying out their work with young people and families. And yet, you showed up. Child and youth care workers showed up in multiple ways. And this is really what I want to focus on for the rest of my time here, is that resilience, that commitment to children and families, that passion, that hopefulness that is so important to the work that we do with young people and families. When I was talking to Merle and Zenny, they were discussing a program that they were developing, a new program. And Zenny made the comment that we don't have any money, but we're going to do it anyway. And I thought, number one, that is my kind of person. And number two, that is what hope looks like. That is hope. Hope is the promise that anything is possible. And that's what hope enables us to do. And now, more than ever, particularly given the times that we're living in, child and youth care workers are being called upon to instill hope, to be champions of hope. And that's what you're doing. The interesting thing about hope is that it's not just a feel-good motion. So while it certainly does make us feel good, hope is predictive. Hope underpins everything that we see and that we do. And the research has shown very clearly that when we are hopeful, we see things in a very different light than when we have lost hope. And individuals who are not hopeful, who are devoid of hope, avoid bigger challenges, they quit things earlier, they often feel helpless and act helpless. Essentially, they don't believe in their capacity to obtain the kind of future that they want. I remember many years ago, my organization was involved in taking over the running of a program that had been operated by a different organization. And this was a very small program. It was for one boy. He was 12 years old, in a house with a team of child and youth care workers providing 24-hour care. And we had been called in to assist because things had gotten very bad. And they were very, very bad. It was the worst situation that I have ever dealt with in my career. And what had happened is this young boy had very, very complex needs. He had an extremely bad trauma history. He was developmentally delayed. There were lots of very problematic, concerning behaviors, and the staff team and the whole organization was just in over their heads. And so some of the protocols and things that they had put in place, the kinds of interventions they were using, were not effective. They did not meet the needs of the young person. His behaviors became more and more challenging and aggressive. And it ended up in a situation with the team spending most of their time locked in the kitchen for their own safety, and the young person being left alone for extended periods of time. And by the time we were involved, the young person had been completely sensory deprived. He was completely dissociated, and the staff were completely hopeless, demoralized, demotivated. And essentially what had happened is everybody had just given up. All the professionals involved with this boy, the team of child and youth care workers surrounding him, and the young person himself had just given up. They had completely lost it. And when we went in, the first thing we did was say and send messages through our behavior that it's going to be okay. And we pulled in resources and training, and we consulted with people, and we did a range of different things. And when we said it's going to be okay, we didn't mean it's going to be okay and all this young person's problems are going to go away and your jobs are going to get easier. In fact, their jobs got more difficult in many ways. But what we meant was, you're not alone anymore. We're going to support you. We're going to travel this path together. And we heard from many of the staff members that made a significant difference in them being able to do the tough work that they needed to do, that they were no longer alone, and there was hope. And that's what our young people and families need from us as well. They need us to believe that there is potential for change. And we need to believe that there is potential for change. We need to believe that every young person and every family has an opportunity for a better life. And when we're hopeful, we see strengths instead of deficits. And if we want to engage with young people and families from a strength-based perspective, it's really important that we maintain hope so that we can help them to develop hope for themselves in their own situations. Hope also changes our brain. So one of the things that happens when we feel hope is that our brain releases neurochemicals called endorphins and enkephalins, which mimic the effects of morphine. And so our own brain chemicals have the capacity to block physical and emotional. It also triggers the release of dopamine, which is the feel-good chemical, and dopamine stimulates motivation. So feeling hopeful actually creates changes in our brain that makes us feel good and buffers us from stress and anxiety. And hope gives us courage. And courage is something that we need in order to be able to do our jobs effectively as child and youth care workers. We need to be creative and innovative and take risks and try new things and go out there on a limb sometimes, even if we don't know that what we're about to do is going to be successful or not. And in order to do that, we need to be hopeful and we need to be courageous. In order to perform all of the various responsibilities of our roles, and in order to enact any of these characteristics of a child and youth care approach, we need to have hope. And the interesting thing about hope is that it isn't the grand gestures. Hope occurs in the everyday. And the everyday is also where our work occurs as child and youth care workers. And so we have the opportunity, because we work in the life space, because we utilize daily life events in whatever context we're working, that means that we have thousands of opportunities every day to give young people and families experiences of themselves that are different from their previous experiences. And as my good friend and colleague, Dr. Tom Garfat says, that is how we create change. We give people experiences of themselves that are different from their previous experiences. So when we delivering food to a family in need, or when we are calling someone just to check in and say, how are you doing? When we spend 2 hours playing a game of cards with a young person because we know that's his favorite game. When we say through our actions or our words, we're in this together, we're going to get through this together. When we end up in lockdown for 5 weeks and leave our own families to spend time with the young people in the children's home that we work in. Those are all opportunities we have to help people have different experiences of feeling safe, of feeling significant, of feeling valued, feeling worthy. And those are the kinds of things that create change, but they're also the kinds of things that lead to people developing. Because it's really, really hard sometimes to be hopeful when the only experiences that you've had send repeated messages that there is nothing to hope for. And we have the opportunity to give people very different felt bodily experiences that enable them to believe that hope is possible. I remember a young person that we took into a program several years ago. She had a history of placement failure. So she had been in multiple placements, foster homes, group homes, and she was at that time living in a group home that had said she needed to leave because of her behaviors. And so she was coming into our organization, and she was moving into a family with 2 very, very experienced and skilled child and youth care workers. And at that first meeting, we just talked about the organization and what things would be like when she moved into the family. We had pizza. She didn't say anything at all. And I remember when she showed up at the meeting, she came in with her head shaved and a black eye, dressed in black. And she picked away at her pizza while we were talking, but she didn't really engage much. And the carers had given her a welcome booklet. So they had written out, taken pictures of their family and their home, and had written out things about what kinds of things they like to do in their family and how they had fun. And they had a picture of her bedroom and told her what that would look like, and talked about how she could decorate it. And she took the welcome booklet with her when she left. She just shoved it in her bag and left. And she was moving in. It was a couple of weeks from the date that she was moving in. And she took the welcome booklet home and she pinned it on the wall above her bed in the group. And she told the carers many years later that during that entire 2 weeks, she, every morning when she got up and every night before she was going to bed, she looked at that welcome booklet, and it gave her hope that maybe this time things could be different. And they were. That's what hope does. Um, the good news is hope is something that we create. And if we don't have it, we can get it. Here are some of the steps to creating. The first one is my favorite. It's look for the back door. As I mentioned already, it's really important. We need to believe, truly believe, that there is potential for all young people and families, in whatever form that takes. And often, when people don't have hope, they continue to do the same things over and over, even though they don't work. That's what Einstein calls the definition of insanity, doing the same thing, expecting different results. But when we are hopeful, when we know that there's potential, um, if things don't work, it's just feedback to us that we're not doing the right things. And so if we can't connect with a young person, if we can't get in through the front door, then try the back door, try the window, climb over the chimney. There's a way in, we just haven't found it yet. And so we need to always keep looking for the back door. We need to maintain a sense of humor. We know that humor is so important in our line of work. And we need to be able to find that even in the darkest times, because that's what helps us to keep going, and to persevere even when it doesn't look like the light is anywhere close to us. We need to identify our strengths, our successes, our resources, and we need to help our young people and families do the same. And that is minute by minute. We need to avoid focusing on what's not working. I think that one is self-explanatory. When we're hopeful, when we're strength-based, we focus on where the potential lies and where the possibilities might be. And we need to do the thing we think we cannot do. There is a quote that I really, really like by Eleanor Roosevelt, where she says, "We gain strength, courage, and confidence every time we really stop to look fear in the face. We are able to say to ourselves, I got through this horror, I can get through the next one. We must do the thing we think we cannot do." I'm reminded of a situation that I was involved in many years ago when I was running a Blacklight theater program for young people that were living in group homes. And we had found out that there was a professional Blacklight theater group in Toronto that did workshops. And so we spent a year fundraising, saving money, in order to take a trip to Toronto to do a workshop with this Blacklight theater group. And we also, of course, had touristy things on the agenda because most of the young people had never traveled outside of Newfoundland prior to this trip. And one of the things on the agenda was to visit the CN Tower. So for those of you not familiar with that, the CN Tower is the second largest freestanding structure in the world. I think it's 533 meters high. And so to go to the top of the CN Tower, you get a glass elevator so you can see where you're going and see how high you are when you get off the elevator. And then there's an observatory on top, so you can look down through a glass floor, or you can look outside over the edge, which is barred, so you can't fall, but it's a big attraction. And so we took all of our young people to the CN Tower, and one of them, who was 16 years old, was very nervous and didn't want to go, and decided at the last minute that he wasn't going to go. And I said, okay, it's your choice, but I'm really worried that you're going to regret it. And I don't want you to make a decision you're going to regret. He said, no, I won't regret it. I won't regret it. And the next day he came to me and said, I think I'm going to regret my decision. And so I said, okay, well, tomorrow morning we have a couple of hours free. And so we'll go up tomorrow morning. And so he and I and one of his friends and his younger sister went up the CN Tower. And as we were going up in the elevator, he had his hands over his eyes like this. He was terrified, and he didn't want to look at what was happening. And when the elevator doors opened, he had the biggest grin on his face that I've ever seen, and he just kept repeating over and over and over, I did it, I did it, I did it. And then he started saying, maybe I could overcome my fear of spiders. Maybe I could overcome my fear of this. Maybe I could and that one experience of doing the thing he thought he couldn't do gave him hope that there were other things that he had avoided that maybe he could also do. We also need to celebrate small wins, make the most of self-reflection. And I'm going to end with this, another one of my favorite quotes from Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Thank you very much for being champions of